Hello there, I am Sarlai, and this is me. And this is you. You want to be like this. Instead, you're like this. Worry not though, future ass-kicker, for we will get you to this point with the beginner's guide to Dark Souls. Whoa there, Tiger, calm down. I can tell you're excited to get into the game. I'm pretty excited for you too. But before we go and do that, we need to know what each of the starting classes is capable of doing and why we have these classes. Now, it's important to note that by no means are you actually required to stick to any class build. These builds just offer a good starting point for people going for a specific route based on statistic placement. Now, before we go into that, we really should take a look at the stats themselves and how they might affect your character later in the game. The first thing listed on the left side of your stats screen is your level. This is the soul level of your character, which changes based on how many souls have been spent to increase different statistics. This will steadily increase as you gain souls from kills and spend them to increase your other stats. The second stat is Vitality. Vitality directly affects the amount of health that you have, each point increasing your health by a percentage return based on the level of Vitality. Generally speaking, diminishing returns have most people stop allotting points between 30 to 50 Vitality, depending on how much each person values health. For those interested, I've included a link down below to an exact breakdown of how much each level of Vitality will add to your health bar. The second stat is Attunement. Attunement affects how many attunement slots are available for your character, or, in other words, how many spell slots you have to use. Spells require a differing number of slots. Some require 1, some require 2, and so on, and generally speaking, this is a very important thing to consider if you're making a caster-based build. Endurance is next. Endurance affects how much stamina, equipment load, and bleed resistance is available to the player. Stamina is incredibly important throughout Dark Souls, no matter the build, as it affects how many attacks you can block, how long you can run, and the ability to dodge. A player that runs out of stamina temporarily cannot attack or dodge, no matter the case. If an attack exceeds the amount of stamina needed to absorb the damage, a character using a shield is staggered and left wide open, as well as taking any excess damage over the stamina limit as actual damage to their health bar. Equipment load is how much gear you can wear without being affected by movement penalties. Below 25% is considered fast movement, below 50% is medium speed, and above 50% is slow. Bleed resistance is fairly self-explanatory, and just increases the amount of bleed hits it requires to actually inflict a bleed penalty or fill the bleed bar. Generally, bleed does about 30% of your health and damage, and depending on the weapon, if you're using Priscilla's, can do up to 50%. So it's good to take these into account, especially if you're going to be fighting close up to people who are often using bleeding weapons. Our next stat is Strength. Strength is a stat requirement for wielding some larger weapons, such as the Dragon Great Weapons. It acts as a weapon damage modifier for other weapons that scale off of Strength. It should be noted that larger weapons require less strength when wielded with two hands, but this requires you to put away your offhand shield or auxiliary weapon. Strength is traditionally a path followed by Heavy Knights, players who generally like being slower, but doing great amounts of damage with 1 or 2 hits. Next, we have Dexterity. Dexterity is much like Strength, but for a different type of weapon. Weapons that require Dexterity often are faster, lighter, and, unlike Strength, the Dexterity requirement is not affected by using two hands to wield a weapon. Dexterity can also increase weapons' damage if they have Dexterity scaling, and decreases the casting time of most offensive spells, but generally you'll only notice a cast time decrease around levels 30 to 45. Dexterity is traditionally the route of the fast swordsman, those who prefer to use bleed weapons like katanas or rapiers, and bowmen. Resistance directly increases fire, poison, magic, and lightning resist. It should be noted that other stats increase magic and lightning resist at the same rate as resistance does. Armor generally also does a great job of keeping a player at a reasonable level of resistance to most elements, so leveling this skill is generally not recommended, regardless of the build you're following. Next we have Intelligence. Intelligence is a modifier for increasing the effectiveness of most catalysts, which are essentially wands, and increasing the effect of sorceries. All sorceries have a base intelligence level that is required, so increasing the skill on a caster class is a must. Certain unique weapons, magic weapons, or those that follow the enchanted weapons path also scale off of intelligence level, much like strength and dexterity, and having an entire higher intelligence level can increase the damage of those weapons. The final stat is Faith. Faith modifies the stats of talismans, which increases the effects of most miracle spells. Faith can also act as a weapon damage modifier, much like intelligence, strength, and dexterity, increasing damage for certain weapons found throughout the game world. Placing points here can also increase a player's magic resistance, which is great for those following a Faith build that plan on fighting a great deal of caster-based characters. Now, with those in mind, feel free to pick any class that seems fun to you. Stats, while not refundable after putting points in and confirming those points, can be leveled at any point you are comfortable with, and any path can be taken by you to create the most awesome character that you can imagine. Almost as important as the stats you choose through your class at the beginning of the game is your gift selection. Gifts offer unique items that are given to your character at the beginning of character creation that have the potential of not being available anywhere else in the game world. It is important to note this is not true of all gifts. Some of them are readily available at one merchant or another, or are lootable from a corpse throughout the game world. The ones that are strongly recommended, though, are either the Master's Key, the Tiny Being's Ring, the Old Witch's Ring, and definitely not the Pendant. The reason I say this is the Master Key, unless you're starting as a thief, is a key that allows you to open many locks throughout the game that are otherwise extremely difficult and require you to go out of your way to open. Now, the Tiny Being's Ring increases your base health by 5%, which doesn't sound like a very large amount, but especially if you're doing a Soul Level 1 run, any amount can help. The Old Witch's Ring allows you to talk to Kellogg's sister, which gives you unique dialogue options through the Sisters of Chaos Covenant, and can offer some pretty unique insight into exactly what that covenant is about. The reason I say not to choose the pendant is because it was openly admitted by the game's creator to be an item that has no purpose. This was announced, or released rather, in a press statement a great deal of time after the game was already released, so it was basically a huge prank played on all of the players. Now, as you might have assumed, the rest of character customization is entirely cosmetic stuff for your character. So, when you've done all that and you feel comfortable with the character that you've made, go ahead and hit accept and get ready to enter Lordaeron for the greatest adventure that you will ever undertake.
In the age of ancients, the world was unformed, shrouded by fog. A land of grey crags, arch trees, and everlasting dragons.